that truck. Trespassers will be fined.
This is my land. You're the ones trespassing.
Oh, you'll pay for this challenge.
The land that fought back. I pulled my old Ford pickup into the gravel turnout beside what used to be a sprawling field of wild rye and clover, a place where my father and I once tossed fishing lines into a quiet pond under the Oklahoma sun. The land had been in my family for generations, passed down through handwritten deeds and stubborn pride. But that day, as I stepped out of the truck, I froze. Where the open prairie once stretched, there now stood a pristine neighborhood of 40 houses, manicured lawns, gleaming SUVs, and a fountain that gurgled smugly in the center of it all. Before I could even shut my door, a woman in a crisp blazer stormed toward me, brandishing a clipboard like a weapon. "You can't park here," she snapped, her voice sharp as a wasp sting. "Residents only. Trespassers will be towed and fined." I blinked, taking in the surreal sight of cookie-cutter homes where my father's land used to breathe free. "I think you've built your little utopia on the wrong dirt," I said, my voice steady but edged with disbelief. She scoffed, dismissing me without a second glance, her eyes darting to the clipboard as if it held divine authority. Behind her, kids pedaled bikes over what used to be my fishing pond, their laughter echoing across land that wasn't theirs. I said nothing more. I just climbed back into my truck, her shouts about code enforcement fading as I drove off. In my glove compartment sat a county deed, crisp and undeniable, proving I owned every inch of this suburban mirage. She'd just threatened the landowner, and she had no idea. Back at my cabin, I spread out the paperwork my attorney, Margaret, had sent me months earlier. I hadn't paid it much mind until now, but there it was, 86 acres of prime Oklahoma land, legally mine through my father's will, tied up in probate for years and overlooked by everyone, especially the developers who'd bulldozed their way onto it. No permits, no letters, no signatures from me. They'd just assumed the land was free for the taking, like wildflowers you could pluck without asking. My phone buzzed with a voicemail from the woman Eleanor. I later learned demanding I stop harassing her private community. I didn't listen to the rest. I called Margaret instead. By noon the next day, we were at the county recorder's office, watching the clerk's face drain of color as he pulled up the records. Not a single permit listed me as the landowner. "This is going to be a mess," he muttered, shaking his head. "Biggest land dispute I've seen in a decade." I nodded, arms crossed, calm but resolute. Let it be messy. The next week was quiet but deliberate. I gathered maps, deeds, and old surveys, building a case as solid as the red dirt under my boots. I didn't storm into their HOA meetings or post rants online. I watched. I waited. Eleanor, the self-appointed queen of this subdivision, ruled with an iron grip. She fined people for planting unapproved flowers, shamed a widow for a garden statue, and ran meetings like a courtroom drama. Residents tiptoed around her, afraid of her clipboard and her fines. One man, Tom, got slapped with a $300 penalty for sunflowers that were too bright. Another woman faced public humiliation for a mailbox that didn't match the HOA's color scheme. It was a dictatorship dressed up in suburban charm. Meanwhile, Margaret filed a quiet title action. The judge, a man who'd known my father back in the day, reviewed the documents in under 30 minutes and issued an injunction. No new construction, no home sales, and every resident had to be notified of my land claim. The letters went out that Friday. By Monday, Eleanor's community chat was a wildfire of panic. Residents started asking questions: who owned the land? Why were there no contracts? Eleanor tried to squash the doubts, calling me a grifter trying to scam their idyllic neighborhood. Then she called me directly, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "There's been a misunderstanding," she said. "Perhaps you're confused about the property lines." I didn't argue. "I'll be at the next HOA meeting," I said. As a concerned party. The HOA meeting was held under a rented tent, with residents sipping lemonade and fanning themselves in folding chairs. Eleanor stood at the front, trying to steer the agenda toward mulch regulations, but I raised my hand. "Is there a protocol for landowners addressing the board?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A woman whispered, "I thought he was just a trespasser." Eleanor's smile twitched. "This is for residents only," she said, her voice tight. I opened my folder. "According to county records, I'm your landlord." The room fell silent as I laid out the evidence. The judge's injunction, the original deed, maps showing every house, every street, even that smug fountain sitting squarely on my land. A kid in the back shouted, "Does that mean he owns my treehouse?" Nervous laughter broke the tension, but Eleanor's face was ashen. She sat down hard, clutching her clipboard like a lifeline. I zipped my folder shut and stood. "I just came to introduce myself. You'll hear from me soon." I walked out, leaving behind a room full of stunned faces and the first cracks in Eleanor's empire. The days that followed were a slow unraveling. Residents started digging into public records, finding the same truth I'd uncovered. Their homes were built on a lie. Some reached out to me, cautious but curious, asking if they could stay. Others clung to Eleanor, who doubled down, holding secret meetings in her garage and urging residents to file complaints against me. She even posted a blurry screenshot of my old LinkedIn profile, calling me a schemer with a criminal mind. Margaret served her with a cease and desist for defamation. The look on Eleanor's face, caught by a neighbor's doorbell camera, was priceless, her mask of control cracking like cheap porcelain. Her attorney pushed for mediation, and Margaret advised me to agree. "It'll put everything on record," she said. "They're not ready for that." At the mediation, Eleanor and her lawyer, a slick young man with too much hair, tried to spin a tale of clerical errors and community goodwill. Margaret countered with an aerial map, stamped with the court's injunction, showing my land's boundaries swallowing their entire neighborhood. Eleanor offered a lowball buyout, well below market value. I leaned forward, my voice calm but firm. "You don't get to steal land and then haggle for it. I want accountability, a public apology, full restitution, and every document showing who knew what and when." The mediator suggested compromises, phased repayments, partial ownership, but I held firm. They'd built their dream on my dirt, and I wasn't blinking first. Eleanor stormed out, nearly toppling a water pitcher. Margaret whispered, "She'll take this public now. Get ready." She was right. That evening, the HOA issued a press release painting me as a greedy opportunist trying to destroy their community. But the internet doesn't forgive lies. My college friend, a journalist named Lisa, published a scathing expose with scanned deeds, timelines, and aerial photos. Headlines erupted. HOA builds on stolen land, faces eviction. Oklahoma man owns entire neighborhood after HOA tries to fine him. Social media ate it up, with memes mocking Eleanor's crumbling kingdom. Residents panicked. Some begged me not to evict them. One woman offered to bake me pies for life if I let her stay. But the question lingered. Why had no one checked who owned the land? The county admitted its oversight. Developers pointed fingers at surveyors, surveyors at realtors, realtors at a shell company that hadn't filed taxes since 2016. Eleanor held a press conference on her porch, ranting about land bullies, but her neighbors watched from behind curtains, some embarrassed, others furious. The court hearing was a reckoning. Margaret laid out the case with surgical precision. No permits, no contracts, just negligence piled on arrogance. Eleanor's lawyer argued for community stability, but the judge wasn't having it. "You don't keep what isn't yours," he said, his voice like gravel. He ruled that residents could stay temporarily during appeals, but restitution had to start immediately. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. I kept it simple. You don't build on someone else's land and expect to stay without asking. The next morning, court orders landed on every doorstep. Prepare to relocate within 30 days unless a settlement was reached. Panic swept the neighborhood. For sale signs sprouted, though no sales could proceed. The county froze utility permits, trapping residents in a legal limbo. Eleanor called another HOA meeting, but this time, the crowd turned on her. They shouted questions she couldn't answer. Why didn't you check the deeds? Did you take money from the developers? Her deflections fell flat, and her spell broke. A man named Henry came to my cabin that night, his denim jacket worn from years of honest work. He'd built his house himself, sold his childhood home to afford it. "If I have to move, I will," he said. "But burn that HOA to the ground before you let them buy their way out." His words lit a fire in me, for vengeance, but for justice. Henry went public, posting a viral video detailing how he'd been duped. Leaked HOA documents followed, showing Eleanor's handwritten note. "Land status unverified, don't worry, no one will check." Her credibility collapsed. For board members resigned, and the HOA crumbled. Margaret and I drafted a restitution plan. Residents who bought in good faith could lease or buy their lots at fair rates, with exceptions for the elderly or veterans. Eleanor's house, though, was non-negotiable. She'd be the first to go. The demolition of Eleanor's house was a spectacle. At 9 a.m., a crew arrived with sheriff's deputies and legal observers. Eleanor stepped out with a suitcase, her chin high but her eyes hollow. She didn't speak, just walked past as the first wall came down, the splintering wood echoing like a gavel. Neighbors watched from a distance, some filming, some crying, some just staring. I stood there, hands in my pockets, feeling not triumph but clarity. This was what happened when arrogance went unchecked. The neighborhood changed overnight. Without Eleanor's iron rule, the HOA dissolved. Residents argued among themselves, blaming each other for enabling her. The community chat became a battlefield of rants and regrets. Meanwhile, the county threatened to cut utilities, forcing residents to face reality. I offered temporary licenses to keep services running, but only for 30 days. Some resisted, hoping for a miracle, but most came to my cabin to negotiate. I met with families one by one. Some paid market rates for leases. Others offered labor-fixing fences, clearing brush in exchange for discounts. An elderly couple asked to stay rent-free, bequeathing their home to me upon their passing. I agreed. Not every fight had to be a war. But then I found something chilling. Shredded HOA records dumped in the creek, exposing inflated fees, targeted fines, and emails showing Eleanor had known the land wasn't theirs. It wasn't just negligence, it was fraud. The city opened an investigation. Subpoenas flew, and developers scrambled to cover their tracks. My cabin became a makeshift town hall, with residents venting years of grievances, fines for RVs, threats over grills, letters shaming them for unapproved gardens. I proposed a new system of voluntary neighborhood trust, focused on maintenance, not control. No fines, no board, just neighbors working together. Signatures trickled in, and slowly, the community began to heal. The final blow came months later. A sheriff's deputy handed me grainy photos from a motion sensor camera near my utility shed. They showed Eleanor sneaking through the woods at night, trying to set fire to my generator. The attempt failed, but the intent was clear: arson, trespassing, felony charges. She was arrested, her last desperate act sealing her downfall. I didn't attend her hearing. I was too busy clearing the creek, watching the sun rise over land that was mine again. The mayor called, announcing a citywide audit of land permits. I declined his offer to join a zoning board. My fight wasn't with bureaucracy, it was with the culture that let people like Eleanor thrive. The neighborhood, now called Ridge Creek Trust, held a potluck that spring. Tables groaned with cobblers and slow-cooked ribs. Kids danced barefoot, and neighbors laughed without fear of fines. Henry gave me a carved plaque that read, "For reminding us who we are when the fences come down." I stood on the ridge one morning, watching sunflowers bloom along the fence line, tall, defiant, free. The houses looked different now, not as symbols of theft, but as part of a new chapter. Some residents left, others stayed, and life moved on. The land was mine again, not just on paper, but in spirit. And the people who remained weren't tenants, they were neighbors. What do you think? Was I too harsh, or was justice served? Should Eleanor have faced harsher consequences, or was her downfall enough? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear your take on power, fairness, and standing up to bullies in everyday life. Let's get the conversation going.